Well, good morning, everybody. With the start of a new month, I thought we should go back and take a quick look at what November did, because many of the things that set up the November temperature and precipitation patterns across the United States are gone, which means a persistence forecast is probably not going to be the wisest choice for much of North America. We'll then walk into a bit about South America. We'll kind of wrap up the story we started yesterday and look out longer range in South America, and then I'll finish up with some international weather. So, first map we've been looking at here looks at the month of November in terms of average temperature anomalies. And this map doesn't contain a lot of useful information. And the reason I say that is because the month of November had a pretty volatile temperature pattern. I mean, we finished the month extremely cold down here in parts of the southeast, yet earlier in the month it was quite mild. And so you don't see the reflection of that when you look at a 30-day statistic. So I think what would be wiser is to just go away from the temperature map pretty quickly here and talk about the precipitation, because this is how the month of November finished out. And what we see here is that the majority of the United States was actually on the drier side of the distribution. We're going to talk about why in just a few seconds here. But driest areas in throughout parts of the Midwest, the Ohio, the Mississippi River valleys, part of the Missouri Valley here. We still have deep drought that's in place down in the southern United States, despite better rains that did come through as of late. Northern plains continue to see drier conditions. The Northwest, although this is going to make a major flip here in the next 10 days, was at times a bit drier than normal. And then you can see down here throughout California into the Southwest drier. Now, New England has better chances of getting more moisture in coming soon, and the South and Southeast is probably going to be the largest area this winter that we're going to see major drought reduction and a lot of precipitation. So that's just kind of a hint as to where I think this is going to go. But we did get a new drought monitor yesterday. This is what it looks like, and we can kind of look at a couple of the stats here in this longer video. So let's do that first. Let's go to time series. I want to keep it on the whole national picture here, and then when you come over here to the end, you can just kind of slide this bar along, and you can see where we currently sit as of the latest drought monitor. There it is, about 55% of the U.S. is in some form of drought, from abnormally dry all the way up to D4 exceptional drought. We have about 36% in the actual drought categories, okay? So we did come down off of a peak, but there are still some places, as you saw, that are, very much deep in drought. I'm thinking about these areas down here. And I'm heading down to Jackson tomorrow to speak with a group of younger growers. Oops, sorry about that. And I'm excited to get down there and see this. In fact, my son wants to come along. He's like, I want to see Mississippi, so I'm going to bring him along and see how it all looks. But this is going to be one of the top things I'll be watching for, is just some of the signs of the drought situation that is going on there. Now, one other thing to point out here, how much did the drought monitor change over the last month? So remember, you can come over here to maps. You can actually just click on change maps and it'll show you, but I also like to look at the comparison slider. So if you come in here, you can choose your left image. I'm going to make it back on October 31st. My right image, I'm going to leave to the next one. So there's the left image, and here's the right. And if I just go back and forth, let's scroll that up a little bit. So that's October 31. There's now. There's been not a whole lot of change, except for in the south, mid-south, southeast a little bit, and then in the southwest. So it's just always fun to do that. Just want to make sure you all know how to use some of the tools on the U.S. Drought Monitor site. Let's check in on some of the variables we've been monitoring for a while. We're going to go to our root zone soil moisture. That's the top meter, 100 centimeters or 40 inches. This is a percentile map, and again, this becomes one of my biggest concerns throughout the month of the next 5 months before we get into spring, is to see the elimination of these significantly lower subsurface soil moisture values. In fact, I had a friend ask me on Twitter the other day, how far behind have we been in western Iowa since 2020? So we pulled up the data here and showed that there are parts of Iowa that over the last 3 years, all combined, are more than 40 inches in deficit. Now, we've still grown good crops during that time period. It's not been the best, but that's a whole year's worth of deficit in 3 years, just to think about how dry some of these areas are. The Mississippi continues to show problems. It's down around 5 feet below low stage. We're going to have to continue to monitor this as we press forward. But I wanted to get into this, okay? This particular November didn't give us any witches across the Great Lakes, right? You know what I'm talking about here, these big storm systems. In fact, we had high pressure kind of coast to coast across the central and northern tier of the United States. It was only lower off the California coast and in parts of the southeastern Caribbean, so very high pressure. And this is also another feature. These deep low that we saw over the Hudson Bay toward Greenland, that's gone. And we've really flipped this whole pattern around away from this. It's also going to change a lot from where the MJO was. See, the MJO spent a lot of time in phases 7, 8, and 1. So here and here. And the suppression was in this area. all of that's now gone. The MJO is moving through the Indian Ocean. It's coming over toward Indonesia and Australia. And will it end up back over here? Sure, but MJO in phase 8 and 1 in December is much different from November. So that's one thing that's also changing. We also watched the Northern Hemisphere jet stream come screaming off of Japan, but then kind of split across the west like this, and then really accelerated as it left the eastern side of the United States. That's gone. The jet is now targeting the Pacific Northwest, and we're finally getting a much different look at the flow for big sections of the United States. So can we get rid of this? If you take that same map, so it's this one, but this is the average, and then we take the anomalies from it, so the comparison to average for this year. And what do we see? Well, there's our subtropical jet. That's a very El Nino-like feature. But with a deep low that sat here a while, you're getting flow like this a lot. And that's why the Northwest, up until now, when all this has just completely reversed itself, has been so relatively dry overall. This did help late with some lake effect snow, but this is our problem. This area in through here had such weak flow throughout the month that it really kept this part of the Central Plains and then nosing into the Midwest so dry. So, okay, I gave you what we had. I've been telling you it's all changing. What's it look like? It starts with this. This was the system that last night came out of Texas. Thankfully, not a major severe weather producer, but actually produced some nice soaking rains. And you can see the evolution of this over the last about 10 hours or so. As it rolled through, it brought in moisture to places that desperately needed it, including some snow here in parts of Arizona and New Mexico. But this is what the last 72 hours has looked like in terms of total precip through 5 a.m. this morning. And this is fantastic. I mean, I love every bit of this rain coming into this area, given how dry it is. Now, where is this map not going to change? It's not going to change much here. And it's not going to likely change too much after this goes through in the Midwest. But the West, especially the Pacific Northwest and the South, parts of New England, big changes are coming. And all of that's being driven by what we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks, this top-down view of the pattern. So working our way into this weekend, we have a couple of troughs, one here and one here, that are sneaking across the United States. I'll show you the precipitation from those in a little bit. But this is a big change. Remember, we did not have a big area of high atmospheric heights and pressure that was between the Hudson and Greenland. So there's our first indication of a pattern change. These deep troughs coming in, sliding in the Pacific, carried by the momentum of the Pacific, which are targeting the Northwest, and these are serious, and they're moving fast. So all of a sudden now the Northwest just really gets under the gun of some of the heavy precip, and I'll show you those totals in a few moments. You get a brief interlude in this as we go past this weekend into early next week. Right, the flow comes around, bumps up over a large ridge, and then dives into the east. So this is that convergent flow, that time where the Prairie, the Plains, the Midwest, we get a pretty long extended break. There's going to be a major warm-up that happens coming off the Rocky Mountains. But notice, this pattern is not stuck. We see out here past Wednesday into next Thursday and Friday. I mean, that next trough just dives in. And as we've been talking about all week, I'm watching the 8th, 9th, and 10th. The system comes in here on the 8th. It digs into the kind of four corner states on the 9th and ejects on the 10th. And we're going to watch that one right here for giving us a pretty potentially, stormy week 2 as we get into the month of December here. So there's still a lot going on, and a lot has changed over the last month. So also just supporting this, the MJO sweeping out here into phases 3, 4, 5. Now, if you just want a quick, I told you I'm going to work on a video for you on this, but a quick thing to think about. If you're just generally making a blanket statement about North America, these phases over here throughout winter, 3, 4, 5, 6, if the MJO is over there, we're going to talk more about mild air. If it's over here in 7, 8, 1, 2, we're going to be talking about colder conditions. So we want to know, are we going to sweep over here in the first half of the month and then sweep through here the second half of the month and then start January? That's one of the bigger questions we're going to attempt to kind of answer in a few moments. But we are in these milder phases currently, and you're going to see that in the temperature pattern in a few moments. So what do we have right now? We've got a pretty colorful map across the west. There's a lot of winter weather advisories, winter storm watches, winter storm warnings. The Cascades could pick up. 40 to 60 inches of snow, flood watches out, high wind coming off the Rockies. I mean, this is going to be super active for this whole section of the country as we go forward. But there's also a little bit of snow that could possibly come through parts of the Midwest as well. We still have the winter weather advisory out here for parts of Iowa early this morning. It looks like this on the high-res NAM. So we could watch the west. It's been an hour talking about, but I'm going to start here first with the system that's leaving this morning, passing through, over toward the eastern Great Lakes, through the eastern Corn Belt. And then it's going to be bringing some decent moisture into the south. Now watch. While snow kind of falls on the northern side of this, okay, so this is through this afternoon, we're going to see kind of a resurgence in two things. Good pull-on moisture that's going to come into the south, desperately need this. And then there is another little shortwave following it. You saw it a few moments ago that sneaks out and maybe adds a little bit of snow on Saturday coming out of Kansas into Nebraska, Iowa, northern Missouri, Wisconsin. So we're going to keep an eye out on that later in the day on Saturday. So you can kind of see that snow moving across here. But the west, I mean, this is just an area that's going to be receiving a tremendous amount of snow and a tremendous amount of rain, specifically the northwest, right in through here. And I want to show you what that looks like. Because the newest WPC forecast, let's see if we got a new one in here. Yeah, there's the 12Z. The newest WPC forecast just went after, this is, they're going after places having 10 to maybe 14 inches of rain, with this being snow in the mountains. Because the flow's coming in like this and not into California, it is drier in California. And because this flow is not supporting big, deep troughs until you get out there around the 10th coming through the west, there's no least cyclogenesis because of it. So look at this large area in through here that's just going to be showing up with dry conditions for the next 7 days because the pattern can't break through the Rocky Mountains to deliver a deep trough. There's no support for it to do that until we get out there around the 8th, 9th, and 10th of the month. Heavier rains down in the Gulf Coast. Love this. We need it. This is the current system exiting. We need that as well. And just to remind you, I am monitoring. I'm waiting on the commercial availability of the GraphCast forecast, the machine learning technique that has partnered with Google and the ECMWF. But I want to show it to you on their site. Take note just of these colors here. So 100 to 300. This is 4 inches to 12 inches. And when you get up into this color, you can see that the machine learning technique for this region is also picking up on these incredible rains. It's got the drier, same place that the high-res models are, the dynamical ones, and the wetter, exactly where they do as well. So overall, you got to admit that it's doing a pretty darn good job of this. Okay, ECMWF total snow. Let's play this through. So here's the snow we're watching on the northern side now. We then get the little kick of snow that follows it from the system that sneaks out here over the weekend. We see the newest snowfall totals for the system that shows up again late this week and early next week for parts of New England. So again, it's this section of New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine that are going to be picking up the biggest snows. But the real show, if I just take you out one full week, is in the northwest. So we have the potential for the Cascades adding in some places. We kind of go off my color bar here, over 40 inches of snow. There's a lot of 1 to 3 feet of snow in the northern parts of the Rockies, and it does extend to the central Rockies as well. So this is absolutely critical early season snowfall for this area. Good news is finally the European 0Z run came in and didn't have that strange variable glitch anymore, so I can show you these with a bit more confidence today. We've already seen through Saturday, so there's the second pull of moisture into parts of the southeast. Here we go. Look at this in the northwest, though, already by Saturday evening. And that's just the beginning. Here comes the next round on Sunday. There's going to be a low that exits east. Now look, finally the models come into agreement. Now, all week long the European wanted this snow and the GFS had nothing to do with it. We've now got it in both models. So that's good to see some consistency there for what's going on in New England. Playing this forward, though, out there toward Monday and Tuesday, we still just have the strong onshore flow. Weak system rolls over the Great Lakes. We get out there past Wednesday into next Thursday. There is something, I got to keep a better eye on this, that's coming out of the Canadian Prairie that's sneaking in toward the Great Lakes, but the GFS has got something a bit farther to the south in it. This has kind of been poorly resolved in the model, so we're going to have to just watch the trend over next week because this is out next Thursday already. But then here it is. Watch this. We get out here to the 9th and the 10th and trying to get to the end of the day on the 10th, and that's when first comes in the west, sets up over the Four Corner States, and then tries to eject, and it's sitting there. and it's got high pressure to its north. That's a key ingredient. There's going to be higher pressure that builds over the southeast. That's going to be a key ingredient, which is going to squeeze a system in between. So I'm just going to tell you right now, out there around the 10th, if you're on the eastern side of the Rockies, let's keep an eye out for our next potential system rolling through. Okay, we've kind of looked at some totals already. Let's look at some probabilities. Next 10 days, the chance of having dry conditions overall. Less than half of an inch is shown here. So we've kind of identified those same areas. And the probabilities of going wet. So this is the chance of getting at least 1 inch of total precipitation. Here's 2 inches. Yeah, I love this. We need this so badly down here. 4 inches, look at that. And 8 inches, I mean, these values are incredible. And might as well, this is 15 inches. There are a few places in through here that the model has a better than 0% chance of getting 15 inches of liquid out of this. That just boggles my mind in terms of what the potential is in the Northwest. But we'll come back to this map, the 2-inch one, to kind of get a good sense of it. Now remember, out here past the 8th, let's get out there. There it is, 8th, 9th, and 10th. That's going to be the system I'm going to keep an eye on. I like the tilt of this trough. Troughs that lean forward, we call that positive tilt, dig. And if it's going to dig, that could give us a really interesting go of it past the 10th in the midsection of the country. Finally, the models are seeing it as well. Like, look, the European just went wetter, GFS went wetter, and the CPC went wetter. So I'm looking at all this because my mind is just drawn to this map here and the corrections that need to continue in this area. There's a system going through now, and then we really don't get much after this, the next, today for many, and then tomorrow in parts of the Midwest. We don't get anything again until the 8th, 9th, and 10th. So I'm going to be watching for that carefully. Temperature side of things, finally, we don't have the frost advisories down here in Florida, but over the next week, there's our frost line. Not a whole lot of surprises there. Let's take a look at what the high temperatures are going to do, and I'm going to be honest, watch the northern plains here. So here's Friday's highs today, getting into Saturday and Sunday. As we get into early next week, watch the mild air just invade the northern plains. So if you look, these temperatures getting up in the 60s in Montana on downslope flow are almost 30 degrees above average. And that's Tuesday into Wednesday of next week. And now we've got that whole area here knocking on the door at 60 degrees. And even next Thursday, it's still there. And that's that warm-up we've been talking about happening. So here's your next 5 days. There's all that warmth building in day 5 through 10. But then day 10 through 15, this is where we start to make the argument for the second half of November having a bit of change. So I'll be honest, I do not right now find myself favoring persistence in the pattern for the second half of November. December. And my reasoning for that is I think the MJO is going to keep sweep. I think it's going to keep going around, and that's going to mix things up and change the Pacific jet. It's going to change the way the flow comes into North America, and we may end up, getting something like this to start the month. Okay, MJO phase 5. I mean, there's that flow coming in. There's ridging here, so that it kind of bounces and makes the turn. But I wouldn't be surprised if we landed ourselves back into some form of split flow by the end of the month and potential major changes for the end of the month. Now, what are the models calling for? Well, the CFS-V2 is all over the place. The ECMWF, which I've refused to show you for this whole week, I think I finally see a better picture in it. But notice this. This is the December 10 to January 10 time frame. And unlike November, the pressure anomalies are lower than average. So that's part of the pattern change. On the precipitation side of it, what about a 30-day outlook in terms of precipitation? There we go. Could we split the flow again in the west? Maybe. Will we bring in flow like this and flow like this and get it all just to come up the East Coast? I can buy that. I think the only region I really buy for being accurate in this forecast and skillful is this area in parts of the South. And there's a lot of evidence for that. We do have an El Nino. We also have a negative PDO, and those two things aren't complementary overall. This El Nino continues to strengthen, and by the way, if you're curious where I got a question, where do you get those graphics for the sea surface temperature anomalies? Well, I just go to Tropical Tidbits. I click on Analysis Tools, and it takes you to here. You click on Ocean Analysis, and then right down there, that'll show you the Nino 3.4, so that's right here. And those ocean temperatures are 1.5 degrees C above average. Now remember, some of the forecast models for the start of December, when you go back a couple of months, we're expecting this to be 2.5 above average. So we're nowhere near the strength of this El Nino that was forecast. But I want to tell you, if El Nino is our most dominant teleconnection, giving us a strong subtropical jet in the month of December, this is what history would tell you. We're a bit drier, California, Oregon, Idaho. Not substantially though, but there's a drier bias. We tend to be really wet down here, and we tend to get some systems finally rolling through the Midwest. That's what December typically does in terms of precipitation. What it also does is it tends to be mild. Mild across the northern tier of the U.S., mild east, and we're certainly going to see that to start December. But look at how cool we tend to be here. And that's the precursor to what happens in January and February. So right now, my long-range forecast, I'm going to base more off of analogs than models. And we'll get new model runs on the 5th of December, so that'll be coming out next week. But if you're curious how January and February tend to be during these transitioning El Nino years after a peak, they tend to really be weighted or loaded into the second half of December. The second half of winter. So it's a January, February, cold, snowy, chaotic time frame, not the month of December. So that's just what we're going to use. We're going to have to use this right now and rely on it, that we're going to go from here in December to here in January and February. So you've got about a month, and major holidays coming up. So if you need to be buying the proper clothing to possibly endure what could be a colder go of it at that point, I just want to make sure you know of it. This is the best information I've got right now. All right, internationally, there's been a lot of discussion about this. That's the new European model forecast for the next 15 days in South America, and here's the GFS. GFS is substantially drier. It is bringing in better rains into Mato Grosso do Sul, out of Paraná into Sao Paulo, into Minas Gerais, this area over here, but it's much drier farther to the north. European model says, no, we're actually going to bring the decent rains into the main growing areas of Mato Grosso and only leave the northern part of it, where this is not a heavy agriculture area here, drier, but it's still drier east. That's very characteristic right now of where the MJO is, by the way, which we talked about yesterday. But just look at how wet it continues to be down here along the Paraná River Basin, coming out of Paraguay into Uruguay, southern Brazil, northern Argentina. That is at least one thing that's consistent in both of the models here. So which model wins? I got to ask yesterday, which one do you prefer? I don't prefer either of them, to be honest with you. I think they both do it. They do their best, but it's not the most accurate and skillful forecast for South America. We're missing a lot of data from this part of the world, so it's hard to get a good, accurate forecast with this. I am going to tell you that both models don't keep it around for a while. If the MJO continues to slide back over to phase 8 and 1, this is what ends up happening in the models. By mid-December, watch this. This is what the third week of December looks like. It tries to move the dryness out of Mato Grosso into the Amazon and recover rains in this area. Now, the game I'm going to play is this. If this verifies, this will be a corrective action on the earlier heat and drought stress we've been talking about for weeks in this area, like in a big way. And I want to let you know here that the GFS ensemble, let's go have a look at it here out there, the GFS extended, it backed away from the exceptional dryness it continued through the month of December in this area. So to show you this, if we're only off over a week by 15 to 25 millimeters, that's only off by an inch. They still get 3 inches of rain in this pattern. So what I'm trying to say here is that this mid-December time period will be the most definitive time period of the entire season for the first crop that's gone into this area. If this verifies, we will make a major reversal in the trend toward the way we're considering the crop here in Brazil. So let's keep that in mind. Next, Europe, another cold week, 10 days, northern Europe into Russia. And the snow is just incredible. 3 feet of it here in the Alps. Look at the new snowfall forecast coming out of parts of France into Germany. I mean, some places in Germany picking up 30 centimeters of snow. And snow going right here through parts of northern Ukraine, but really hitting Poland, Belarus, and then getting into Russia. So some heavy, heavy snows, very cold conditions. Winter's coming full on in Europe right now, thanks to the big Greenland Ridge. And then also, I've been keeping you updated on the Panama Canal. You can see down here that we've got very dry conditions continue to get forecast. And the statement I made all month was that if the rains don't return in early December, we'll be talking about Panama Canal issues with drought all the way till next June. And here it is. And finally, just to give you that global outlook, we still have some decent rains in New South Wales and Queensland, and a little bit down here in Victoria. So again, Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria. Wet Indonesia overall. Wet India. Continue to be dry in South Africa. So those are going to be stories we'll have to keep following too as we work our way through Northern Hemisphere winter and the beginning of Southern Hemisphere summer. But a longer video today, but I wanted to cue you in on all the things I'm keeping an eye on. So I'll stop there. Tell you all have a great weekend, and we'll pick this back up on Monday. Thanks.